Tony Payne is our distinguished alum, and he recently retired after a long career at MEMIC. He was the senior vice president of external affairs. He is, y'all know MEMIC, of course you know MEMIC, one of the largest workers' compensation insurance companies. He is a beta class graduate, that's 1995, and he's the former board chair of ICL. So not only was he a graduate, many of the graduates at that time went on to be engaged with either our alumni or as board members. Carolyn was one, Carolyn Nishon from PSO, the executive director, was also on the board. Any other board members from the past here? Okay. He has employed the organizational and collaborative leadership skills throughout his professional and civic life. Not only did he do that within MEMIC, and not only was he a champion for us within MEMIC, he also takes all that out to service on the Falmouth Town Council, chair of the Board of Visitors for the University of Southern Maine, executive director for the Alliance for Maine's Future, and then earlier this year he was recognized for his advocacy work as the 2023 Volunteer of the Year by the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. And of course, he's our ICL Distinguished Alum. I think I've only listed maybe about a third of what this man has been recognized for and the ways that he gives back to his community. He is retired for about 2 months now, but I did have a little short conversation with him about how that's going. I think it sounded like it's going pretty good, but I also know that he's not a guy to sit on his laurels and stay at home. He'll stay engaged in some way, shape, or other, and I've already heard a little bit of that, so I guess it's a stay tuned, right, Tony? Yeah, it's a stay tuned from that perspective. And he and his wife, Charlotte, have 5 children, so he's contributing to Maine's economy by making sure we need to keep that population going. He needs to be a grandfather next, and resides in Yarmouth. So with that, Tony, I'm going to welcome you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do something I have never done before. I'm going to have to use a tablet, and I'm probably going to read a speech, which I have never done in my life. But I've never been asked to offer a keynote address either. So this is great, I hope.
Tony, is that true?
Not a keynote. Well, actually, no, that's not true.
Okay. You are still a distinguished alum.
There we go. Well, thank you, Jan, Kathy, Julie, and all the folks from MDF who make this program possible, as well as Leadership Maine. These are the premier programs for personal and organizational development. None better. And you are now about to be in that circle of nearly 800 graduates of ICL and nearly 1,900 that when you throw in Leadership Maine. That's sort of heading for critical mass in a state that desperately needs leadership. So what I wanted to do today was just talk a little bit about how we got here, where we came from, and if you don't mind, I'm going to sprinkle it with some of my own experiences in terms of how I employed my ICL skills throughout my career. I am older than dirt, but as I said, well, let me get to it here, because otherwise I'm going to ad-lib all the way through. Over the last 29 years, I've used so many of the lessons of ICL in my career, and that deserves a very grateful shout-out to everybody involved. I'd also like to thank my friend Joel Russ, who was the former president of the Greater Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, who nominated me back in 1995 to join the program. Joel himself is a member of the Alpha class and epitomizes everything that ICL stands for. There is a man who will not sit still, and he's still doing great work in the mid-coast of Maine. I also want to thank Jim Orr. For some of you, that may be a familiar name, but Jim was the president and CEO of Unum. I think we've got Unimites here somewhere. It was his vision to create ICL, Jim perceived that the fabric of leadership in the southern Maine region was growing thin, and that the region could desperately use a leadership development program. And so with UNUM and with the help of a lot of people across the region, they brought together the appropriate people in order to put together what I, again, have said is truly a remarkable program. And yes, it may be, there may be programs like it elsewhere in the state or elsewhere, but this one I think is particularly special. I also want to thank Janice Cohen, who was the original director of ICL, and that then was passed to the hands of Ellen Grant, and now with Jan at the helm, we have had this wonderful string of really capable, inclusive leaders. But the reason that we have ICL is that it was a time to change the leadership model. Now, I know you guys have talked about leadership. What does it look like? Where does it come from? What works? What may not work? And in the good old days, the heroic model was really almost just a child of World War II. I mean, I was thinking about this last night. I was born 8 years after the end of World War II, which is just a staggering notion that it was that close to such a seminal event in humankind. But we relied on heroic leadership. But that doesn't necessarily fit every community or every situation. And what ICL was founded on was the notion of collaborative leadership, that we get more people around the table having meaningful discussions about not only what the challenge is or what the opportunity is, but also how are we going to make sure that people's stake is heard and, to the extent possible, acted on for the greater good. Suffice to say that collaborative leadership makes us all better and improves chances for success and sustainable solutions. I'm truly honored to be your speaker today and incredibly grateful for being recognized as the Distinguished Alum for 2023. How quickly we go here. While I turned 70 this past November, my emotional and developmental age is that of a very curious and enthusiastic 12-year-old. With that in mind, my hope is that I can share with you today some of the values and practices that I learned during my leadership journey and with the benefit of ICL. I also hope you won't mind if I share those experiences just to illustrate some key points. And those key points are 3. I'm going to give you some milestones here so you know when I'm going to wrap up. 3, expectations, inclusivity, and courage. So let's start with expectations. You're here today because somebody believed in you, just as Joel Russ believed in me as a potential member of the beta class. You must have demonstrated some innate characteristics that made you a candidate whether you sought this opportunity or not. Over the past 6 months, you've given your time and talent to enhance your leadership skills. You've made good friends. You've met a lot of new people. And you've examined your own motivations and aspirations. You've been belayed. You've listened to speakers. You've camped out under a tarp, maybe a tent, and engaged in group problem solving. You've also, as I understand, have articulated your visions with every bit of emotional capital that you had to expend. And most importantly, you've been given the gift of self-examination. Let me share a quick story about confronting one's beliefs about civic life. In 1992, at the ripe old age of 40, I ran for the Republican nomination in Maine's 1st Congressional District. My opponent was a person of little-known origins named Linda Leon Wood Bean, someone with ungodly amounts of money and 100% name recognition. Now that's a really high wall to climb. But I said, what the heck? We had different perspectives on the role of government. And lo and behold, many of the differences that we had back then are with us still today, except with much sharper edges. But having said that, I found that that campaign experience, which predated my ICL time, really helped me focus, helped me really hone and decide and think about, what do I really believe in? These big issues, because people who go to the polls want to know, where does the guy stand? Where does the woman take her position? Where does it come from? What's the underpinning? So I talked to one of my old bosses and friend, Jock McKernan, about this primary, and he said that in a Republican primary in Maine, there are 3 issues that will determine the outcome: guns, gays, and abortion. And he said you can only afford to be wrong on one with the majority of Republican primary voters. Well, in 1992, my moderation made me wrong on all 3. And so, needless to say, no one has ever had to call me congressman. But I can live with myself. I can live with myself for knowing what I believe to be right. In your civic journey, I hope you have that same opportunity to understand and stand for what you believe is best for the community. Being out there with this credential means a great deal to the future of yourself, but your community as well. So let's get back to you. While you've been given this gift of self-examination, you may not have thought about the expectations that come with the investment of dollars and/or time from your employer, and perhaps out of your own pocket. What's the return on investment for them beyond being simply a good corporate citizen? Well, let me tell you another story. A few years after we graduated from the beta class, an ICL classmate commented about the impact of ICL in his business. The company was doing an enterprise-wide initiative and had several work groups pursuing very different topics, but would come together in the end. And by that time, he already had a couple of ICL grads on his team. And he said that as he went through checking in with all of them during these long work months, he noticed that those who had ICL grads in their group worked more efficiently, they were quicker, and they were far more inclusive. He said it was a distinct difference. And so again, I just wanted to speak to you that you now carry a tool set that is not commonly or easily found in the workplace, and that you have this opportunity to use those tools to great effect. And for many, your employers are waiting for you to produce the ROI. And I'm sure that those expectations will be met many-fold over. So it's a great example, I think, of the fact that we can be better together. It's also a reminder that with few exceptions, and really take this one to heart, very few exceptions, our personal success is seldom a solo act. Others are involved. Others either mentor you, or collaborate with you, or they follow you. But you're not alone in your own journey. Successful leaders require the help of many others. I can tell you that I can't adequately thank my parents and employers enough, particularly MEMIC, for giving me the foundation and opportunity to pursue my civic life. I had great role models, and in turn, one of my absolute favorite leaders today in Maine is the guy I work for, Mike Bork. I had the great privilege and incredible wisdom to hire Mike in my first tour of duty at MEMIC. I left the company, he stayed, he became CEO, and when he stepped up, he said, "Why don't you come on back and take your old job," which was his job. And I cannot thank him enough. This also tells you it's really important to stay in touch. And they all enabled me to be my authentic self, and I can only hope I have repaid their generous investment. The same goes for ICL. Without ICL, I wouldn't be standing here today. So back to you. When you add your credentials, graduate of the Institute of Civic Leadership Elelphant class, it carries weight. Not only is the program well regarded, the name is somewhat self-explanatory. The word institute suggests a course of inquiry and learning. The word civic defines where these lessons may be employed for the greater good of the community and the state. The word leadership reflects both your behavior and the character of your potential. If you haven't already fulfilled many of the dreams and aspirations that you have for your career and your life, it's coming, and it's going to be all the better for your experience here. As Joe Biden might say, it's a big deal. Now that you carry this credential, it's not a check-the-box achievement. It comes with expectations. I'd like to ask that you be mindful to exercise this newly finely tuned muscle that you have to lead in your communities and your organizations. Which brings me to my second thought, being inclusive. One of the most important lessons I learned with ICL is to ask a fundamental question. Who's missing from the conversation? Who's not at the table that ought to be here? As the ICL Carabiner plaque states, and you will be receiving that as your memento for your hard work, and there are roughly 800 of these scattered around in offices across the entire state. So on this plaque, it says, if you bring the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, they will create authentic visions and sustainable responses to issues and opportunities within their communities and organizations. So the elements are the right people, good information, and a real spirit of collaboration. You can do almost anything if you bring those elements together. But inclusion goes beyond just inviting people to the party. Leadership is also about drawing people into the conversation intentionally, going around the table and asking, so Janet, what do you think? Or Eric, how can we solve this problem? What are your thoughts and what talents do you bring to the table? It not only keeps people's minds in the game, it gives them a stake in the process and the outcome. That's the magic, getting people vested in the outcome and having the satisfaction that their voice was heard and their contribution was meaningful. That is no small order. But as a leader, if you practice these skills, and it's funny, I'll tell you, I knew about it, I learned about it, but until I had the title chair of any number of organizations, it was really, I really had to be mindful about practicing it. To really look at somebody across the table who you know, they're sitting back there, they're fidgeting, their body language says, I'm not in, I am not in. And I won't say call them out, but more importantly is invite them in and say, so Jeff, what's going on? What are you thinking? And you'll get something very rich in return. But you need to as I say, you need to intentionally call people into the conversation because they're in the meeting. They've been invited. They're there for a reason. They have talent and they have opinions and they have a different perspective. And therefore, you're going to get a better outcome. Another aspect of being inclusive is to intentionally, and that's one of my favorite words out of the pandemic, is to be intentional. We used it a lot at MEMIC because you really had to be mindful given the fact that we were then a dispersed workforce. So being intentional as well about creating opportunities for your younger colleagues. When you see someone whose elevator goes to the top and the lights are on, create a path for their participation, whether they work for you or for somebody else. By expanding your social, I shouldn't say expanding, expending your social capital, you will enrich someone's life and expand the circle of future civic leaders. So let me give you one more story of engaging someone at the margins. During a student networking event at USM, I met a young guy who was in the wonderful risk management and insurance program at USM. I asked him, so what do you plan to do with this, this credential as you graduate? And he said, I don't know. I said, have you talked to anybody in the insurance business? No, because I've been busy studying and I deliver pizzas at night and I have other responsibilities. I said, okay, let's get coffee, let's have breakfast, and let's talk about getting networked. So we went to the coffee place, we grabbed our breakfast, and he said, look, before I could even begin chatting him up. He said, look, I'm a 4-time convicted felon. I'm in recovery from my addiction, and I'm a dad. In the financial services industry, a criminal record is a non-starter. Forget it. You're not going to get licensed. You won't be allowed to do business. Well, exercising my ICL muscles, I said, well, let's see what we can do about that. And I didn't call in any favors or try to pull any strings. I just served as the navigator to bring the right people together with good information, and it worked. Today, this talented and sober young dad is a rising star in his company. And paying it forward, he now serves on boards of directors for nonprofits and is well into being a success, a long-term success in the career of insurance. I believe everyone who's able and willing deserves a seat at the table. As civic leaders, you too have an unusual power to help make that happen by expending your social capital. Finally, my last thought, that was number 3 coming up, be courageous. As we think of the events of the last 5 years, it's difficult not to be woke. There, I said it. The term woke, because it's so much more than simply being made aware. It's meant to be a state of being. It's to be deeply aware and to understand the consequences of inaction. It's also a term that doesn't come from the comfort of white privilege, but rather from lived experience of Black Americans, and later by those who have been similarly marginalized in civic and political affairs. Being woke is a good thing and is so much better than simply being aware. It's like being an emergency responder who runs toward the fire or the accident. That is a state of being woke, and we can use a lot of it. The Me Too movement, sparked by the outing of Harvey Weinstein, the eruption of Black Lives Matter following the murder of George Floyd and far too many others at the hands of police, the shaming of world leaders by 16-year-old Greta Thunberg at the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019, these are all events that brought forth the appropriate people with good information, but who had for far too long been at the margins of decision-making. These events gave them agency and purpose. They acted like emergency responders. And, God bless my mother, they found the microphone. It's really important. You've got to be able never to let a microphone go to waste. In each of these events, people displayed their courage. They added their collective voices to challenge what they knew in their hearts was wrong. They began the hard work of change. They had less regard for what people would say about them and more regard for justice. They do not cower when the term woke is used as a pejorative, and neither should we. These are the times we live in today. These are the times in which you are expected to lead with inclusivity and courage. Now let me cut to the chase. I'm almost there. Throughout my career in communications, marketing, and advertising, I've always included a call to action. If you're not asking your listeners, your viewers, your readers to do something or to think differently, then you may as well not waste everybody's time. More importantly, I blew my line earlier, more importantly, my mother taught me very early on, she said, never let a microphone go to waste. So here are my 2 requests. We're in the midst of a titanic struggle that will determine the course and character of our country for a generation or more. The choice will be between continuing our path as a liberal democracy or veering toward an authoritarian regime. The right to vote, faith in our electoral process, the separation of church and state, diversity and equity, reproductive rights, our environment, school funding, international standing, they're all on the ballot this fall. We're all talking about the fundamentals of our civic life. As I said about my own candidacy, I had to wrestle with and come to terms with what I believe, and I think we all need to do that as well. So my first request is that you be informed and that you make every effort to amplify what you know to be true. Facts matter. If you're looking for a good read and have not read Liz Cheney's newly published book, Oath and Honor, I'd ask that you give it your full and undivided attention, and soon. It's weighty. But God, is it a great book. It describes in detail the events and deceptions that led up to the attempt to basically prevent the peaceful transfer of the presidency. And it foreshadows the authoritarian agenda, an agenda that deprives people of having a seat at the table and a voice in the conversation. You also may benefit from visiting Nationhood Lab, the initiative of journalist and historian Colin Woodard. Colin, as you may know, is a very well-regarded journalist from Maine who has quit the newspaper and set up with the Pell Institute to do what he hopes will be a new American narrative, finding the things that we can agree on, telling the story of the higher purpose of what this democracy means in the lives of ourselves and of our children and our communities. The second request is both easy and difficult. The easy part is vote like your future depends on it, because it does. And same goes for your family. The more difficult part as a civic leader will be to persuade others to do the same. Your family, your friends, children, neighbors, and coworkers. A stranger at the coffee counter. Sharing good information is essential, but the only thing that really matters is who casts their vote in the majority come November. Collaborative leaders like you can make a difference. Congratulations, go get it.